New Zealand would like to see you for a Santa Claus advert. And I went, oh, that's great. It was a Zoom audition. My agent said, you've got to at least have your first vaccine shot. And I was like, but it's Zoom. And she went, I know. It felt like a cramp in your foot when you're swimming. And you swim too long, you're like, there's agony. But I remembered it felt just like the pericarditis I'd suffered 10 years earlier. I don't spend much time feeling sorry for myself, talking about my injuries, and most people who I know don't know about this. I choose not to tell them, and I just quietly get on and tread softly through life. You know, I don't want to make big waves. I'd rather just drop a stone in a still lake and just let the ripples go out. You know, tread softly. My family, the Macfadjans, an old Gaelic word which means to correct, to put right. And my first name, Norman, means man of the north, or a Northman. So my family originally came from Norway, and my family were crofters there. And so lived with the land and off the land. Prior to my vaccine injury, I was a fully fledged member of society, active in the performance world, and I loved doing immersive theatre projects, teach people axe throwing as a Viking and archery, fight choreography and stuff. So I teach people how to fight, in a dancing way, in a fun way. And so when the vaccine rollout came, I said, absolutely no way. Back in the day, I did a health studies degree before I went into nursing. So I did do a little bit of virology and immunology at uni, in the lecture theatre, and I kind of understood the process. I've worked in healthcare for 35 years. I kind of understand the process of when you're trying out a new vaccine and the clinical trial and the period of time that takes. I'm not anti-vax. I've been a nurse for years, and I've probably got more vaccinations than most people, but I didn't want any of this experimental nonsense put into me. I was working on a weekend in a respite unit. It was a wonderful alternative to psychiatric hospital. I was pretty much a guest house operator. They would come, and we had a wonderful facility there where people could enjoy the views of the sea, where they could sit in an art room, or they could go into a lovely immersive therapy room with beautiful sensory modulation equipment there, and I love being their host. I really enjoyed it. And then the vaccine mandates came in, and they said, you've got to have this by the 15th of November, otherwise we can't employ you anymore. And I said, I'm not going to have it, and I don't want it, and here's my reasons. And they were very good, very reasonable people, and beautiful people, good people. But they were being sucked along by the government and saying, well, it's not us, it's the government that said it. We love you and we don't want you to leave, but we can't employ you unless you have your full vaccine status. And I can remember standing in this beautiful respite unit right next to a poster with the patient's code of rights written on it, and I'm reading it whilst I'm talking to this bloody general manager. And I said, can I just stop you for a minute, and can I just use something here as a resource to actually explain to you that what you're doing is wrong? And here's 10 points of why it's wrong. And I remember reading out, point by point, the patient's codes of rights, which are your rights. They're your rights. It's not a mandate. It's not a questionable contract between two people or two groups. It's your rights as your fundamental human rights. But please put it in writing, and let's keep everything from now on as an email correspondence, so that when the day comes, you and I can sit in a room and you will apologize for doing what you're about to do to me. They didn't like that, so they put me on garden leave to make my mind up. So off I went home. I had some time to think for a week or two, and I was thinking about my future and how do I feed myself, how do I pay for things, how do I live. I've always worked hard, in my life, and I thought, if I'm going to get kicked out of society because of my stance, what's going to happen to me? And then my acting agent got in touch with me and said, Air New Zealand would like to see you for a Santa Claus advert. And I went, oh, that's great. It was a Zoom audition. So my agent said, you've got to at least have your first vaccine shot for this audition. And I was like, but it's Zoom. And she went, I know, but tell me about it. But that's what they've said. You've got to be vaccinated, at least with one shot. So I spoke with my GP. I spoke with the vaccinator. My situation was I do my own research. So when the Pfizer vaccine came out, I go on to Pfizer's website and I look for what's called contraindications. These are previous things you might have, conditions which should exclude you from having to have a vaccine. You should be able to get an exemption. And one of them was pericarditis, myocarditis. And it was written on Pfizer's website. So I spoke to my GP and I said, you know that I have had viral pericarditis. I was in hospital for a week back in 2012 after a mosquito bite in Vanuatu on holiday. This is what I've had, and you should be getting me an exemption. And she said, nobody's getting an exemption. The only people who are writing exemptions are Ashley Bloomfield, Chris Hipkins. Nobody's getting one. I will support you through whatever happens to you, but you need to get your vaccination. Went to the vaccination centre and again spoke with the vaccinator and said, can I just say I've had viral pericarditis, which is a contraindication. You should be advising me, you should be telling me that I shouldn't have this. And she just simply looked at me in a dumb, blank expression. She went, well, why are you here? Did you want it or not? And I was going, no, I really don't want this thing in my system at all. But I'm being kicked out of my society. I'm not going to be allowed to work. I'm not going to be allowed to go to the gym. I'm not going to be allowed to go swimming, go to the library for books. I'm not going to be allowed in society. I really don't want this. But my hands, not my own. My arm's been twisted behind my back. I said, just do it. Just do it. Let's see what happens. So she did. And it was that night. It was about 4:30 in the afternoon. That night, went to bed. And sometime after midnight, I was in a nice deep sleep. I wake up with this excruciating pain in my heart, at the top of my heart, top of my chest wall. And for the next 15 minutes, I've been a nurse. I kind of take my pulse, and I'm like, my pulse is really strong and healthy. And well, I'm sure that if it was a heart attack, something would be, fibrillating, gone a bit crazy, and I'm breathing good, and what's going on? So it felt like a cramp in your foot when you're swimming, and you swim too long, you're like, there's agony for a while. That's what was happening with my heart. But I remembered it felt just like the pericarditis I'd suffered 10 years earlier. And over the period of about 15 minutes sitting there, I could just feel a movement from within my chest wall of something moving down my heart from the top to the bottom. And I just went, okay, that's probably a reaction to the vaccine. And it's not a good one, but I'm alive. So let's see how I feel in the morning. I went to work the next morning, and coming away from work, 2:00 in the afternoon, I felt this pain starting to develop again. And I went, right, okay, I need to go to a walk-in centre. They did an ECG there, and they said, yeah, you've got some abnormality thing happening there. You need to get yourself to ED within the next 2 hours. So I got down to ED. They kept me there for about 6 hours in the waiting room, as I watched other people coming in on trolleys with heart conditions, from work. There's a couple, and they did an echocardiogram at the time, and they went, well, we can't see anything, so they discharged me after midnight with paracetamol and ibuprofen. This continued to happen to me every day, possibly 2-3 times a day for the first 18 months. And so, yeah, when that happens to you, and then, as I say, you've been kicked out of society, so what starts to happen is you start to mix and mingle with other people who've been kicked out of society, and you start to hear the stories of other people's injuries, and you start going, my goodness, isn't this terrible? And why is nobody saying or doing anything about this within the press, within the government, and why am I not getting any help? And so I went back to my GP and I said, this is unacceptable. He went through a whole series of trying different medications, from amitriptyline, which is a old school antidepressant, but then we tried Norflex, which again is another kind of muscle relaxant. We tried propranolol, which is a beta blocker, which slows your heart rate down. None of these things were doing anything, and so I ended up getting a MRI and CAT scan, and then they found this huge pericardial cyst, which is now sitting on the bottom of my right atrium, which is down the bottom of your heart, and that's 5 centimeters by 5 centimeters by 2.5 centimeters thick. I went to, on recommendation, a cardiac imaging specialist to look at my reports from all of my various scans and whatnot. And he turned around to me and he said, I know why you're in my office. I know what you're coming for. Bearing in mind, I paid this bugger $750 for an hour of his time. And he said, but I can't give you what you want because I can't see the evidence. And I just went, but I'm not an imaging specialist, and I can see that big white blob on the bottom of my heart. Can you not see that? He went, yeah, but where's the correlation? I went, because I felt it form on the day I had my vaccine. That was the first time I've had pain like that since I had viral pericarditis. And he went, so where's the correlation? And I was like, wow, really? So you wouldn't say that it was related to my vaccine? So I've just recently had another scan and an angiogram, which is where they inject the isotopic dye into your blood, and they kind of see what's happening with all your vessels and whatnot. So we'll see what that comes back at. But it's took me 2 years to get more investigations because they've just left me with my GP, who, bless him, is a lovely man, who's just trying to help me. And he feels so bad on my behalf, and that's what I get. And I don't like sympathy from people. I don't seek sympathy. I believe in standing on my own 2 feet. I help other people. That's because I am a man, and I care for people, and I care for my community. But as a personal manner thing, I find it very hard to reach out to ask for help from anybody. When I went down to Wellington, I was driving down with the convoy. I'd been mandated out of my job, and I'd been vaccine injured with this first Pfizer vaccine, so I was a little bit lost because I'd been kicked out of society. I had nowhere. A lot of friends and family had turned on me because I couldn't have a second vaccination, so not my son, not my, closest, my nearest and dearest. They shared similar thoughts to myself about oppression and oppressors and, my right to choose. And, I've always been someone who's been a shield and an axe for people who, can't find the courage to speak for themselves, which is why I've worked in mental health for many years. I've always championed other people's causes, fired other people's bullets for them because I don't care. If something's wrong, it's wrong. Since I was in that convoy going down to Wellington, and I was talking to my son on the phone, and he was saying, what are you going to do when you get there, Dad? I said, I'm not sure. I've never protested anything in my life. I said, I'm not sure about what form that is. Do I punch a policeman? Does a policeman punch me? I'm really not quite sure what's going to happen. So the first people I met on day one were some beautiful Māori. They kind of joined in with the whole, let's stand up against the oppressor and let's have a conversation here about, the future of the nation and where we're heading as people, and is this what we want for our grandchildren, or, well, this needs to end now. We need to have a conversation because we're not happy with the overreach of government and the way things are changing. So we took a stance together. They understand a lot more than I do. about where you should be with your heart and your mind and your spirit. And so they took me in as a friend. I was embraced by my Māori brothers and sisters. They went, "Welcome to our world." Welcome to our world. Hello. And so, yes, I've been living with them off and on for the past few years, and I have nothing but love and joy and peace and happiness when I'm with my friends. I've got some beautiful friends. I've made some incredible connections these past few years, ever since I've been kicked out of mainstream society. That's a beautiful thing, that I learned from my friends there, is that we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors to see the future for our children. And that's how it should be. And we're here, I guess, to bear witness to what's going on around us. And somewhere out in the magic out there, we kind of chose to be here. And so I never dwell on the things that have been done to me that have affected my health. And I tend to focus on good things. Don't look back in anger, as Liam Gallagher said. So, he's probably not a good man to quote, but I don't look back in anger. I have nothing but gratitude in my heart. I've got a big heart. I've been offered surgery to aspirate or to remove this cyst. They say it has a consistency of water and blood, 50-50. So they could stick a needle in there. They could go in and they could try to aspirate some of it, but it's so your pericardium's like a protective sheath. It's like a bag which surrounds your heart, which protects it from any invading potential viruses. I don't know if you've ever been hunting, or if you cut up a nice big bit of meat and all of the striations and muscles, they come in different packages, and they have like a very thin silvery skin which just covers certain muscle groups or strains. And if you put your knife into that, then it can just split. My life before this was I was at the gym 5-6 times a week, working out, keeping fit, core strength, and I used to be quick and strong. I still am strong. I still got a good heart rate and all of that, but I haven't been able to work out because from day one of this accident to my heart, I was also getting other symptoms as well, like being breathless and, not being able to walk up a flight of bloody stairs without panting at the top and going, what the hell? I just had to cut out all of that hardcore stuff that I used to love at the gym and try and do gentle exercise, go for walks. I felt like an old man. I've never felt like an old man. And so, yeah, your body is your temple. And, mine's now old, crumbling, haunted, possibly cursed. But, yeah. So you just got to kind of change with and adapt. That's what we do. You change, you adapt. And so, I've got lots of new interesting hobbies and activities which are good for my mind. Now that I've got 2 beautiful grandchildren, well, I feel like I've passed the finish line anyway. I've passed on the mantle of father to my son. I've always been a bit of a comic, and I love making people laugh. And part of that is, I'm very quick-witted. I was always, never thoughtful, just say what you think. And so it was a case of, if it's going to make somebody laugh and risk offending people, who cares? It's just comedy Tourette's. But since this happened to my heart, I'm no longer as flippant, and I'm a lot more thoughtful and choosy with my words now. For a long time, I used to go to bed every evening and think, am I going to wake up tomorrow? So, I think the words I choose to use have to be good, because they might be the last words that I say to people who I loved. So, yeah, it's changed me. I think I'm better for it. I think